1988 college football season ended, and Kansas State had completed its second straight winless year. There had been 3 different head coaches in the previous 5 seasons, and now there would be another new head coach. No one knew what to make of Bill Snyder when he was introduced. He had been Iowa's offensive coordinator for the previous decade, and the Hawkeyes had had great success. But Snyder hadn't been a college head coach. Kansas State lagged in revenue and facilities and had been called Futility U and America's most hapless football team by Sports Illustrated. Snyder agreed to be interviewed for that story on the promise that when things turned around, the magazine would return to chronicle that. Sports Illustrated returned. The construction of the Kansas State football program is one of the greatest accomplishments in college sports. From a regular at the bottom of the conference standing to very close to a shot at the national championship with conference and division titles, constant double-digit victory seasons, and All-America players along the way. Coach Snyder sat down with me, Blair Kerkhoff, for an extensive interview on the program. We talked about his motivation and formative years, early signs of progress, some of the program's great players and games, and other highlights in his 27 years as the head coach over 2 stints with the Wildcats. And we asked him what he thinks of the current regime. I really enjoyed catching up with the coach who came to the area the same year I did. And I tell people who take Kansas State football success for granted, you wouldn't believe what it was like before Snyder arrived. Okay, let's get started. My first question to Bill was about his upbringing in St. Joseph, Missouri, and his mother, Marionetta, who was the most influential force in his life.
Anything that I have that might be considered positive comes from my mother. I can assure you of that. She was still an amazing woman. You know, my mother was 4 foot 8 inches tall. She never weighed 100 pounds in her life, never weighed 90 pounds in her life. And yet, she's the strongest person I've ever met. And we lived most of the years that I can remember. I was born in St. Joe, and my mother and father moved to Chicago. My father was a salesman, moved to Chicago, and then moved to Salina, Kansas. And then my mother and father divorced, and my mother took me back to St. Joe. And so I spent all my years that I can remember in St. Joe. And my mother started out as a saleswoman at a department store called Townsend, Wyatt and Wall, which is the most infamous department store. You know, it's like a 6-story building, and every floor is a different department. And she became a buyer for one of the women's departments there, and would travel to New York all the time to buy. And that was the only time in my mother's life that she ever traveled. She didn't have an automobile, never drove a car in her life, didn't have a driver's license. We lived in a home. It was turned into an apartment building by the owner, but it was one of the largest homes in St. Joe, and it was 6 blocks from where she worked. So it was right in, almost right in. It was right on the fringe of downtown St. Joe, Missouri. And the lady that owned it I remember her well, her name was Josephine Kellogg. And you've heard of Kellogg cereals, etc. That's the Kellogg family. And her husband had passed, and they lived in this large home, and she opened it up and made apartments of it. So we lived in the second floor, and we lived in a one-room apartment. It wasn't one bedroom, it was one room, period. My bed was a Murphy bed that came out of the wall. My mother slept in a cot that I would pull off of the landing every night and bring in and open up. And yet it was, I thought I was the richest kid in the world, and it was just because my mother, because of her presence, I think as much as anything. And she worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, walked to work, walked back. Just an amazing woman. I don't know, I could go on forever.
How about when did sports enter your life?
It was really always there. When I was just a young toot there in St. Joe, the street that we lived on, it was 5th and Ruby Doo was where we were, and the street was a brick street. And there were a lot of kids in the neighborhood, and we would go outside and we just played sports all the time. And we'd play tackle football on the brick streets. We played baseball on the brick streets. We'd go to the elementary school, which was 6 blocks away, to play basketball because they had goals outside. But we played all the time. So sports was in my life, from the very get-go, and I really enjoyed it competitively and organized sports. I think baseball was the first thing I take that back. Competitive swimming was the first thing because the YMCA was also 6 blocks from our apartment, and my mother, knowing that she was going to be working all the time, she didn't want me out doing things that I would have done had it not been for the way she guided me. But she took me down and enrolled me at the YMCA, and she made an arrangement with one of the people down there that if I didn't arrive there at such and such a time, and if I left before such and such a time, they could call her direct, and she'd have me back in a heartbeat. I didn't buck my mother at all. So I'd go to the YMCA every day and swim, play basketball, play ping pong, a lot of different games, that they had. But they had a competitive swim team, so I learned how to swim competitively, and then their competitive team traveled. And so at a young age, I was traveling throughout the state to other, swimming was a little different, a little more popular at the time. And so I enjoyed that. And when I went to, they had, the only competitive swimming I could do was they had a city swim meet every year, and I would always swim in that. And then I went to work as a lifeguard at the country club, and the country club had a traveling swim team, so they let me swim on that. And then when I went to William Jewell College, I was on their swim team. So swimming was a big, factor in my life. I enjoyed it a great deal.
It was also the first sport you coached, wasn't it?
It was the first. Let me think back. Yes, and I was I was still in high school when
Right.
I was coaching. I coached the city team there, and then I coached the country club swim team. So, and that was fun.
Right.
I enjoyed that.
As a youth, you were close to Kansas City, and I know the A's were in town then. But were you a fan of any team, or did you consume sports that way through media or TV?
Media, we did. My mother did finally get us a TV set, so and I think it was. I mean, it was just tiny. But I certainly watched it all the time. But I don't know, just through the media,
right.
you know, somehow, and not as much as today, you know, through the media. And I don't even remember. I doubt we took. I don't think we took the newspaper because of the cost.
Right.
So it was radio, I think, probably as much as anything.
Okay.
And interaction with other people.
Right. Okay. I think you heard the story about how you started at Missouri in college and didn't work out, and that's how you ended up at community college, I think, next, right? And then William Jewell. Is that the order?
There is a community college in St. Joe, and I went to the University of Missouri, and I was there for one semester, and I finished the semester and came back and did the second semester at the community college in St. Joe, and then sat out and worked during the summer, and then went to William Jewell the next.
And this is because you were a
year.
pretty good high school football player.
Well, I was good enough that the coach from William Jewell was named Norris Patterson.
Right.
Amazing man, amazing person. Actually came to see me and invited me to come to William Jewell. They didn't have scholarships. They had to pay your way, and I told him, you know, I couldn't afford it, and I certainly wasn't going to have my mother, you know, going to debt doing that. So he said, we'll work out a job for you, or several jobs, and you can earn your way. And he did that. So I worked the whole time I was there. Worked at, then during the summers, I would come home and work at Noma Lights.
Christmas lights.
Christmas lights, yeah.
Yeah. Would you box them up? What was
Boxed them and transported them. It was interesting, now that I think back. That building was, anyway, it was close to my house, I think, 2-3 blocks away from our apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And from the top floor to the bottom, it had the slide that circles like that, and they would, everything that they manufactured, they put on that, they box it and put it on that, slide it down, you know, for delivery. And that was such a neat idea that I used to go up and slide down with them. And fortunately never got caught. Had I probably would have been without a job.
So at what point after your, as your college football playing continued, at what point did you think about maybe becoming a coach?
Well, you know, I can't tell you when. It was before I went to college. I mean, because sports was just ingrained in my life, I labored under the assumption that that's what I would do. And so I can't remember that I ever thought that I would do anything differently, that I would be anything other than some type of a coach.
At some point, the coaching travels took you to California and high schools in California. Can you trace that progress?
When I was at William Jewell, and as I indicated, my coach there and my my guiding light, Norris Patterson, knew that I wanted to coach. And he had kind of guided me in that direction, but I didn't really need guidance because I just thought that's what I was supposed to do. So when it came time to graduate, I really didn't have any place to go. So through his guidance, as he did with all the students, he was also the head of the physical education department, and he somehow arranged for me to get a position at Gallatin. And after I had been at Gallatin 1 year, I had visited with him and told him I would like to move up. And he knew a fellow I know what it was. I wanted to go on and get my master's degree. And I wanted to coach at the same time, so I didn't know how to go about doing that. And he contacted a fellow that he knew at Eastern New Mexico University. And they arranged for me to come down, wasn't called that at the time, but basically a graduate assistant. And so I could do that and do my master's degree. So I got my master's degree in a year, and then it was time to move on, and I just applied every place you could apply, and I got a response from Indio, California, and I had no clue about Indio, so I accepted the job sight unseen, and got in my car and drove to California and looked around to find an apartment and the whole bit. So anyway, took the job there I was the assistant football, basketball, track coach, and the head swimming coach. So it was, and that's just the way you did things, and it was, I enjoyed it, and it was, and a lot of wonderful people out there, and I was there for, I think I was there for 3 years. I was there for 2 or 3 years, and then I visited. I wanted to get into college coaching. So and USC was John McKay was, I idolized him, and so I tried my darndest to see if I couldn't get into USC to do my master's work, or to start, not my master's, to start my doctorate. And in doing so, if I could volunteer to assist on the football team. And Craig Fertig, they directed me to Craig Fertig. He had been a All-American quarterback there.
Remember the name. Yeah.
And he was on the staff as in fact, he was the freshman coach. That's when they had, freshman football. And so I got connected with him, and he let me be an assistant to him. So I didn't do a whole lot, just kind of watched, as much as anything. But it was a great experience for me, and I got to be on the field. I idolized John McKay, and
one of the all-time greats.
Coach McKay had this funny way of walking and moving around the field, and I used to follow him around and emulate him. He always had one hand in his pocket, and I'd walk around with my hand in my pocket. I'm sure I looked as goofy as one could, but I was there for a year, and hadn't finished my doctorate yet, and I had intended to stay there, but Indio High School called me, and the coach there retired, and they asked me if I would come back and become the head football coach, and so that sounded good, so I did that.
Okay. And there were some, I know at least one other high school stop for you in California.
Was Foothill High School.
Foothill, right? But I guess I want to pick it up in college and joining the North Texas staff with Coach Fry, and a big moment, I guess, transitional moment for you, and that the first time as a full-time college coach.
Right.
How did that come about? And
I contacted him out of the blue. He didn't know me, and I didn't know him, and he didn't know anything about me. But he invited me to come down and visit. And so I went to Denton and spent some time with him and some others. Bill Brazier was a football coach there at the time, and was a defensive coordinator and became a good friend. But nevertheless, Hayden hired me, and so I stayed with him, and then he went to Iowa, and I followed suit.
Mm-hmm. It turned out to be a turnaround job at North Texas. They had been down.
Well, they're actually in Iowa too.
Yeah, both places.
But Hayden, I mean, that was Hayden's thing.
I was going to ask you about his ability to do this.
Now, he was an amazingly personable individual, and everywhere he went, people loved him. He was a good speaker, and so he came across extremely well. Players, he just endeared himself to players, and players loved him, immensely. So, and he was good about letting coaches coach. He wasn't. At first, I thought he was somebody that was just going to do it all,
right?
And you just kind of stood with your thumb in your ear. But he backed away from that very quickly, and he let you coach.
So things are going pretty good for you at Iowa and the family, and I think I have read that you could have envisioned yourself staying at Iowa for even longer and continuing in the role that you were in at the time, and it didn't happen that way. So I guess I had forgotten that Iowa and Kansas State had played games against each other in maybe 88, 89, or 78, 87, 88, something like that. There was a home and home series. And that was really your only impression of Kansas State.
True. And I really didn't know anything about Kansas State, and I had no intention of leaving Iowa. I wasn't looking for a job. I didn't have a resume. Nothing. I mean, I was there for the rest of my coaching time. And one day, it was Sunday afternoon, out of the season, and somebody knocks on my door, and I answered it, and there's a gentleman standing there, and I have no idea who it is. And it's Steve Miller. And he introduced himself, and he had a fellow with him, and I invited him in, and we sat and talked, and I shared with Steve how much I really appreciated it. Nobody had been, had gone to that much trouble for me, and I just said, but I just can't leave. I'm not going to leave here. And finally, after he'd been there for about 2 hours, he said, "Coach, do you have an extra bedroom upstairs?" And I said, "Well, you ask." And he said, and these were his words, he said, I'm not leaving here until you at least commit to coming and looking at Kansas State. And I thought, you know, for somebody to go to this amount of trouble, that he's going to, I can at least tell him, which I did. I said, Steve, I'm not going to come coach at Kansas State, but give you some peace of mind so you can go home, I will come down and visit. But I want to assure you that I'm not going to take the job. And so I did, and a couple of, or I don't know how long after, a week or so, I went down, and the first place I went was over here. They had the place called the room called the Legends Room.
Right.
And so he took me over there, and you know, there's 200 people in there. I don't know what number it is, but it was full. Right. And I said, what's the occasion? I found out very quickly. And so, you know, he introduced me to people, and everybody had their, you know, reason why Kansas State was the right person, the right place. And he introduced me to the president, and he had the reasons why. And then during all that time, I pulled, I think it might have been Steve, aside, and I asked if he could get someone who could take me around the campus. Because I had never seen the campus, hadn't been on it, never seen it. And he got a young lady, and she and I got in the car and drove around the campus. And when we got on the campus, I got in the middle of it up by Anderson, I said, would you let me out here and come back and get me in a half hour? I think it was half hour. And she said, well, you know, I'm supposed to stay with you. What do you want to do? And I said, I just want to see the campus, and I don't want to visit with people. And so I got out and just strolled around and stopped everybody that was on campus, that I was next to, around. And after a half hour, the young lady came back, and I was late, and it was probably an hour later. And so we got in the car, and it came back, and they were still having this deal over here. And John Weepall told him I'd be back, and so I went up to see John or Steve, one of the two, and said, told him I'd been on the campus, and I talked.
There was more work here to be done than maybe you anticipated.
Well, Steve, and he said, what caused you to change your mind? And I said, simply the people. You know, and I just appreciated so much how gracious, how cordial everyone was. You know, it was just like it was a group of people coming out of the same system, which really it was. And so I left at that and went back home and gave some thought to it and said, I'll do this. You know, Steve is Steve Miller I'm talking about. He's quite a fellow. Steve didn't show me everything and certainly didn't tell me everything. I didn't even see the locker room while I was here to visit. You'd think that at least show you where you were going to be, or an office space or any of that. We never walked across field. But when I got here and I saw all those things, it was interesting because everything needed to be redone. And I didn't want to be one of those guys that just came in and spent money. So anyway, I asked Steve to come over and visit and told him, what needed to be done. And he said, guys, go through. I'd like to tell you we can, but we can't. We just don't have the money. And I remember distinctly telling him, I said, Steve, I'll pay for it. And we had already gotten I had a guesstimate about what the costs would be. And I didn't have that money. I didn't have that kind of money at all. But I said, I'll pay for it. And that embarrassed Steve. And rightfully so. And Steve said, okay, we'll get it done. You're not paying for it. We'll find a way to get it done. And he contacted Jack Tenure. And Jack came to see me. And again, such an amazing man. And Jack said, what do you need? Picked up the tab. And he became probably as good a friend that I've ever had in his family, just because, and he was such a down-to-earth, you remember Jack, he was down-to-earth guy. I never saw him in anything other than a pair of jeans and
flannel shirt.
Flannel shirt. And he was my idol, that he could have all he had and just be himself. Quite a guy.
So those types of things start to get taken care of. The sort of the foundation, the foundational elements of the program. But I think the other, the people, the players who were here had been beaten down. Had been beaten on the field and then beaten down as athletes. And it just kind of breaks my heart to hear what that was like when you had met with them and what they had gone through for too long here.
Yeah, I just remember that and that's probably what you're mostly alluding to, the very first meeting that I had with players over here to introduce myself. And I asked each one if they would speak to what their experience had been, because I didn't really know. And it just knocked a hole in me, to hear what they had gone through, the difficult times, and my admiration for the fact that they were still there was absolutely amazing. And not that it was any one person, not the previous coaches or anybody's fault. It was just, it was the way it was. And there was not a player in that room. First meeting, there were 45 remaining players on scholarship. Not a player in that room had ever participated in a victory at Kansas State University. Not one.
I knew that streak had gone on for quite a while, a couple of ties, but no victories, right? So I wasn't here when the streak ended. Like I said, I was here for Northern Iowa, but I wasn't here for North Texas. But I remember watching the highlights and just feeling good for everybody associated with the program. So that first season is 1-10, and there must have been some indications to you that even with a 1-10 record, you could see the progress.
Well, I mean, that's true, and that's exactly what I told our players. You know, at the conclusion of the season, you know, I said, and not just at the conclusion, but throughout the course of the season, I shared with them, you know, each week we were a better football team. They got better every week of the season. And I pointed that out to them. You know, that I wasn't disappointed. You know, I wanted to win just as badly as they did, but I was so pleased that they were making the kind of progress, because that's all I ever said to them. You probably heard this story. The very first time that I met with them, I brought them out here on the field, and I had the scoreboard turned on, and I gathered them all at the 50-yard line, and I pointed at the scoreboard, and I said, I will never judge you based on what that scoreboard says. But I will based on you doing things the right way, that you be good people, that you work as diligently and as hard as you can. Maybe not in those same words, but that was the essence of it. And I meant that. I never brought up a loss in that first year. Never referred to score, in that first year. It was just about them becoming better.
The progress begins to happen, and the victory totals reflect it. And as this is happening, word is getting out that your office light is still burning at midnight on some days, and you're in there, before dawn in the morning, and it is a work schedule the likes of what we used to hear about Dick Vermeil, and he would sleep in a cot in his coach's office. I don't know if you ever slept in your office.
At a couch.
But I had never heard a coach who was keeping the kind of hours that you were keeping.
Well, it wasn't to do anything other than do what was necessary to get it all done. I mean, it was, when you're, in that situation, there isn't enough time. I mean, there truly is not. And, there is always something more to do if that daily improvement and build the program the way you want it to be, and to motivate the young people to become what you hope for them to become. It's ongoing.
And your diet became a story too. Did that start when you came to Kansas State, or had you?
No, I have always been. My diet is not good at all. I understand that, but I was never a breakfast eater. I would always, even when I was growing up with my mom, she wanted me to eat breakfast, but I loved sleeping. And so because I never got any, so I would sleep as late as I could and get up and hop out the door, and I was gone. So I just learned never to eat breakfast. And when I was at school, I didn't want to spend my mother's money. And so I didn't, she would give me, I know at one time I can recall, lunch must have been a quarter, because that's what she gave me. And I saved up all those quarters that she would give me, and I would slip them back into her purse, never telling her, and just, but, so I didn't eat breakfast and I didn't eat lunch. And then when I was coaching, and not at home, I stayed in the office, and to me, I had learned through staying in the office during the lunch, everybody else was gone, I could get so much work. Nobody bothered you, you get so much work done. And it worked so well for lunch, I did it during the dinner time, and it worked so well there that I really took advantage of the time. And so, and I knew I had to eat something, so I would eat when I'd get home at night. So we're talking about midnight, your one meal of the day. And it became such a habit that I just always did it. I'd eat, do the last thing I'd do before I go to bed, and that's the worst thing in the world for you to do from a health standpoint. Yeah, that was the nature of it.
Well, it all worked. We'll fast forward to the bowl game. I wasn't there, but anybody who was, it was such a memorable occasion, and the outcome, of course, was fantastic. But the number of Kansas State fans who traveled to Tucson for that bowl game. Nobody knew what would happen because it hadn't been to a bowl game since '82 or something, or '81, whatever it was, and then to have at least half the stadium, and that had to be as memorable as the game itself.
Well, it was. Probably the one thing that sticks in my mind more than anything is the night before the game we had a in-house pep rally. And it was at the hotel where the team was staying, and I had arranged, for the fans to come so our players could see the support that they had. And I didn't realize it was what it was. I mean, there were the hotel people told me that they had to keep some people outside because of the fire laws. And the room we were in, they could only allow 5,000. And it was full, and there were a ton of people outside, and that was amazing, to me. If I recall correctly, I'd put me in tears. I mean, it was, and it was amazing to, our players as well. So.
You had terrific players in your first decade or so, a little bit less than a decade, including Sean. I'm going to talk about Sean in a minute, but you get a quarterback in Michael Bishop who's a bit of a transcendent player.
Well, we were fortunate to get Michael, and Michael came to Kansas State because he was committed to being quarterback. And he had, and Michael, when you know Michael personally, I mean, he is, he's very proud of himself. And no one recruited him as a quarterback, and he wouldn't have anything to do with it. And we were the only school. I was the only coach to recruit him as a quarterback. And that made him leery because nobody else would, and I promised him that, and that was my intent. And so many, even people on our staff said, he's a great athlete. He can step in and play probably any place right now. Put him there. And I said, that's the kind of quarterback I want to build this program on. That's what we want. That's our quarterback. And so, and again, I don't think until it really happened that he really totally trusted that I was telling him the truth.
I've never seen a person throw a football as far as Michael pitch it, but
I think one of the first things I did was bring him out here and have him. He throws from goal line to goal line.
It's not human.
I know it is. It's just amazing.
Let's talk about a couple more guys. Darren Sproles. I can remember in Johnson County how he had a kind of a legend growing there. This person that nobody could even see on the football field until he scored from 80 yards. Was another. Just transitional player for you guys.
Well, and first and foremost, he's a great person.
Great family.
Beautiful. Yeah, and losing his mother was really a sad day for everyone, certainly for him. But he wasn't a guy that tried to show himself off. He was very low key, very humble, and I can remember saying, it was amazing. There's another guy that's not recruited. I mean, nobody wants to recruit him because he's just tall. And I was excited that nobody else wanted to recruit him. And people ask so many times, why did you recruit him? And he's such a tremendous player, tremendous talent. They said, but he's so small, and how is he going to hold up? And I said that was probably the major factor in my decision to have him was his height. If he had been, if he had been 6 foot, I think he'd been an average player. His height was such a great advantage for him. I used to get on the other side, and that's where I realized that I would, because he, in practice, he's just break the line of scrimmage and he's gone. And I'd get on the other side and watch.
Behind the defense.
You can't, behind the defense. And I realized immediately, the first day I was there, you can't see him. And by the time you do recognize him, it's too late. And you can't get to him. That he had that built-in advantage. I mean, he was a skilled athlete, don't get me wrong, but that his height was such a tremendous advantage for him.
Worked in the NFL too.
Yeah.
Had almost 20,000 yards in the NFL.
Right.
So.
And that's, you're talking about big athletic guys, but you're looking here and all of a sudden he's here. You didn't see him slip through.
We're doing all we can to get him in the Hall of Fame, the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame. Yeah. Great teams, great seasons, great games. Can we speak to the importance of the 2003 Big 12 championship game? I know there was some. It was such a great game and occasion for Kansas State, and I know there were some behind the scenes things that were, that affected you emotionally for that game, reading in the book. But I think Kansas State fans would call that maybe their favorite Kansas State victory, that win over Oklahoma at Arrowhead.
Yeah, many of them do. It was, and I've said so many times, I don't know that Kansas State ever played a better game. I mean, there wasn't really that big a difference between Kansas State. Oklahoma was probably the better team, and Kansas State maybe, a step underneath that. But our players were so motivated, for that ball game. It was probably as highly motivated, and our players were pretty good about being able to get themselves motivated at the right time to play. And I don't know that there was ever, a time that they were as motivated as they were for that ball game. And confident. The confidence was there from the moment they stepped on the field.
I think they were a big underdog in that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so.
And after losing in '98 and 2000 in the title games, it was a trophy. It's a trophy occasion, for Kansas State. And did you personally feel, just were you able to put previous Big 12 title game losses aside by winning that, or did those never go?
No, I don't think I ever lost sight of that. Yeah, that was very difficult. Yeah.
So the 2003 championship game happens, and now we're coming to the end of your first tenure here. Can you just share a couple of thoughts on what made you think that was the time to step away, 2005?
Well, I was getting up in years, and I wanted to leave the program in good hands, and I wanted to leave a solid program in good hands. I just wanted to make sure that somebody wasn't going to have to start over again, that they could step in and pick up where things were. And there had, I don't know, I won't say I neglected, but I really wasn't with my family nearly as much as I should be, and children were growing up, and the wife was having to do everything, and so that was a big part of it.
And then the call to return. You were ready to get back, and they were ready to have you back.
Well, it was it was a hard decision. It wasn't as easy as it may have seemed. I had missed it, and it was hard when I first stepped down. But after I had been away from it for a while, it was, I was fine. And so when the call came to see if I would come back, it was hard. I said no first.
Right.
And, there was that persistence. And, eventually I said, well, I understood the need. And I didn't want to see the program take any more hits. So I, consented to do it and said I would be short term, which turned out not to be true. So, but anyway, and I never regretted doing
it. If I'm doing the math right, 9, 10, 11, 12, Big 12 championship in the fourth year back, 2012. I was here the night that he beat Texas, and that was quite a scene on the field after the game. Colin Klein becomes a pretty pivotal figure for the program. And on the second part, what made Colin such a special guy?
I think his parents had a lot to do with it. I guarantee you that. They were really wonderful people. And they developed him, aside from athletics. I mean, they developed him as an amazing person. He was a hard worker. He was a tremendous leader. He embraced people. People reacted to him, responded to him in such a meaningful way. And he still is, the same. And those are the things that made him, what he was and is, today. The other stuff, he wasn't a Michael Bishop or an L. Roberson or somebody that had all those gifts. But he played to his potential more greatly than any person I've ever known.
He was a tough nut too.
Yes, and that was something, when you met Colin and around Colin, the last thing that would come into your mind would be that physical toughness. But, he got beat up and got right back up and never complained about it, never said anything about it. It was coach's dream.
Before I forget, I want to go back to Sean and how important he has been to the whole thing. To come here and really be your first All-America player, and to have the roles that he's held here. I can remember one time talking to him at Big 12 Media Days in Dallas, that telling me all the hats he was wearing at the time, and my gosh, he is. I think about a lot of your family when I see the name of the stadium, but I really think about him too. Yeah. He's been pretty pivotal for the whole thing.
Well, I've said so many times, Sean did more for this program than anybody, including myself. And you talk about wearing a lot of hats. And in the long run, and I was kind of selfish. I mean, he was so good at what he was doing that I'd tack on more and tack on more and more. And yet he did it all so well, and did it with such great loyalty. And everybody recognized it. I mean, and they appreciated it a great deal. Players appreciated it. And he, from a coaching standpoint, I mean, when you've got a coach that can go out and do it, then that makes a little bit of difference too. And he got to kick all of our punters, and but all the specialists really, admired him, so much, and consequently responded to him, so well. And it allowed me to understand, after I'd seen him on the field in that role, it allowed me to understand how good we really could be on special teams, and the impact that could have on winning and losing in our program. I mean, like all coaches, we all say, special teams is 1/3 of the game. Right. It's as important as anything. And probably because of Sean, I believe that. Well, I think most people say it and don't believe it. And I believed it. and it was every bit of that.
How much joy did you take in Kansas State's championship last year? And I'm sure you'll agree the program seems to be in pretty good hands right now.
I think it is, and I think an excellent staff, and I think they have the last group that we had is the few leftovers will be through this year, but I think they've done an excellent job of bringing in quality players as well. So it's rewarding to see all that take place.
Can you tell us what's your relationship now with the program? And
well, I have stayed away intentionally because I didn't want to put somebody in. That's hard. I mean, you would say, okay, you're following a program that had been in awfully good shape, and I didn't think that was fair, to anybody, and I didn't want to be, in a position where everybody wants to, how about you help them here, or can you comment on this, or tell us what we think here. That I just didn't want to be in that position because I didn't think it was fair to them, and I thought they'd do well. I just wanted them to have a chance to do it without somebody looking over their shoulder, or them feeling like somebody was looking over their shoulder. Yeah. Okay.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Bill Snyder. I want to thank him for taking the time and sharing the story of his incredible career with us. I also want to thank producer Randy Mason for putting together the show, and to our SportsBeat KC podcast staff of Todd Feeback, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. Hey, please take advantage of our star products like Morning Sports Edition. It's the nation's top digital sports page and can be found at liveedition.kansascity.com. Also, our regular SportsBeat KC show is available wherever you download your podcasts. Thanks for listening.